Hello and welcome to the top Hearthstone cards of the week, where we look at the r/custom Hearthstone's top cards of the week. I'm your host Matt Damon, and first up we have Do or Die, a 2-mana hunter spell. Draw your entire deck. Some of the pros I like of this card design is that it requires deck awareness. Your knowledge of what's in your deck will influence whether or not you do or die. Also, it's kind of like a lethal finder with some RNG effects into it. Another thing is it kind of promotes combos. It's about thinking turns ahead. So, you'll see what cards you end up drawing. You can say, okay, I have Do or Die in my hand. I'm just waiting for this one more card, and then I'll pull the trigger so I can get this lethal or maybe get a chance to get a lethal next turn. I kind of thought originally, what if you use this card with Hemet? So you draw this card, you use Hemet, and then you draw your entire deck, and you make a deck based on that so that you could have some crazy finisher. The problem with this, though, is it's a hunter card, and while cards like Highmane, Bliss Highmane, are really good, they're not necessarily OTK or combos, so that means it would probably be used in the late game, which Hunter doesn't do very well at the moment. But this kind of leads me into the next point I want to make, and that is that Hunter and balancing this card in the future would kind of be tough. There could be a really weird deck that just runs all chargers, all attacks, and you play this, I don't know, when you run out of steam like turn 7, and then you basically just try to win off of that. It's an interesting mechanic, but I fear it could be used for aggro, but maybe it just wouldn't be efficient enough, and so maybe you'd have to use it for control. I like the design. I would want to see this in play because it would be such a meme. And next up we have 8 mana 10/10 Stitches, neutral legendary taunt with the battle cry destroy a minion, subtract its stats from this minion. Just destroying a minion for rogue costs 5 mana. That's kind of ridiculous, but it makes sense because maybe you completed the paladin quest and you just put that minion out and you're able to get rid of it. You can get rid of it with minions even though it can't be targeted by spells, and that's why, while that is a powerful effect, and I do like the drawback of subtracting its stats from this minion, I don't think it's statted correctly. There is the rogue card that allows you to destroy a minion and then add its stats to your Cthulhu, and this is, kind of the opposite of that effect, and that card's like a, 7 mana 5/4, something close to that. But this card here, 8 mana, it's gonna be hard to justify this. Yes, you're destroying a minion, but for 8 mana, you can't really do anything else in the turn. I do like that it's taunt. Taunt doesn't add too much value, but if you're in a dire situation, this could definitely help. I think hard removal like this, even though you do get a minion, it's hard to include into a deck. You could put it in a control deck, maybe. If Control Warrior was a thing, I think this could definitely see play. But I would much prefer it be like a 6 mana 8/8. I think that would be better. If you kill something with more than 10 health, you're basically killing this minion, spending 8 mana just to kill a minion. So that's why I think if you made it 6 mana, maybe it would be a little bit more powerful. With that said, I really like the design. I like the battle cry. If there's no minions out on board and you use 8 mana and you destroy just like a 1/1 to make it a 9/9, it's not that good of a card, so you really have to use it situationally. But let me know if you think it is underpowered or overpowered, or how you would change this card. A lot of the comments actually on the Reddit post said this was way too overpowered, and part of that was because it was neutral. But I only think it's slightly better than Assassinate, and it's a little bit more versatile. Next up we have the 1 mana warrior spell Impale. Destroy your weapon and give a minion can't attack. So this introduces 2 pretty unique game mechanics. First off is destroy your weapon, which has been seen in Rogue as a board clear. Now the problem is they rely on their weapon quite a bit, and they usually only run the more powerful weapons. But I could see this being run on like the second swing of a War Axe, so I think destroying a weapon could be worth it, but it is very situational. And the next effect is giving a minion can't attack, which is an interesting thing to do. It's not destroying a minion, which means, there's certain ways to get more value out of that minion. Once it becomes can't attack, you could evolve it, you could silence it so that you actually can attack with it. And there's different ways, you can even taunt it up. There's different ways to make that card useful. On the other end of that scale, if you don't have any cards that can do that, basically you have a minion out on your board that's useless. It's kind of like when you get a silenced Doomsayer and you can't do anything with it. Giving a minion can't attack, I definitely want to see that played more. So I think this card brings 2 very kind of unique abilities, brings them together, and implements it in a creative way. Also, I think this being 1 mana is really important. Maybe it should even be 0 mana, because I think destroying your weapon is such a harsh requirement. I mean, okay, if you're playing Pirate Warrior, they're not going to be playing this card, but if you're playing a control deck, you only want to run the best weapons. It's a very situational card, but I think in a certain meta, when like if decks were established and let's say there were only 10 good decks through all the classes and one of them was a control warrior, I think this card could definitely see play. Next up we have Low, True Neutral. It is a 4 mana 3/6. When the game starts, if your deck contains only neutral cards, your hero power becomes discover a card from your class. Now first of all, neutrals tend to be less powerful than the class cards. With class cards, depending on what deck you play, but you'll get spells, you'll get board clears most likely, and things like this are really powerful in the game, so making a deck of only neutral cards is pretty bad, but then discovering from a class of cards is usually better than discovering neutral cards. Right now, the neutral cards are actually pretty powerful, but I think as more expansions are released until the next rotation, I think more and more class cards are going to be more important and more powerful than just the regular neutral card, and I think this is just because class cards are supposed to be more powerful because they're specific to an archetype, they're kind of more unique, and of course there's spells, and spells are pretty powerful. So even with this, even making a deck of all neutral cards, even if that's viable, discovering a card from your class for 2 mana is really not that good. Explore and Goro, it's not necessarily from your class, but at least that's 1 mana, man. And yeah, you don't have to draw cards, and you still get to use those neutral cards. If you can make a control deck without board clears in neutral, discover cards as you go, start accumulating the cards you may need, play them reactively, I think it's an alright effect, but I don't think it's really powerful enough. Now there's one more thing. This text gives you the hero power at the beginning of the game, and maybe that would help with make this card more viable, more playable, but in my opinion, I think the Reno Jackson version would be a little bit better, which is to make this a battle cry. And that's because at the beginning of this rotation, I'd want the player to have to play neutral cards at the beginning. Most likely you aren't going to hero power if your hero power is discover a card for the first 4 or 5 turns if you have a good curve. Or maybe if you're playing a control deck, maybe you'll use it the second turn, but then you kind of want to play cards. So I think what making this a battle cry does is it makes the user actually play a neutral deck, make that a viable deck, and then if this, comes into play, whether it's turn 4 or turn 20, it has to be able to be a viable deck without this card. Even if it's designed around this card, you need to be able to not draw it sometimes. This card would basically give you a lot of value out of your hero power, even though it's super slow. I would kind of want this to only be in effect once you play the card, so I would just make this a battle cry, but besides that, I think it would be a fun card, probably pretty harmless to the meta, but you never know. And last up we have 3 mana 4/3 Sneaky Spy. Neutral card, battle cry, discover a card in your opponent's deck and change its card back. So the text may be a little bit misleading. Commented down below, the creator explained that discover a card in your opponent's deck does not mean you actually get the card. So the effect of it is that you notice when your opponent draws the card. It would be super interesting to see if you could see this card once it's the next card in your opponent's deck. And it would be useful if that actually was seen by your opponent as well. So let's say you mark Leroy Jenkins, you're getting low on health, and then you see that Leroy Jenkins is your opponent's next card. It's in their deck, they're going to draw it next turn. You can then adjust your game and play it according to that. Your opponent, a little bit more in the dark, they know that you selected that card as the card that you wanted to keep an eye on, but they don't actually know what it is. This requires knowledge of the deck you're playing. It gives you insight on what deck your opponent might be playing because you're able to see 3 cards from your opponent's deck. And it also gives you a slight advantage. And the battle cry can be useful in both aggro and control and mid-range decks. I really like the idea of distorting or changing your opponent's deck. Getting insight on your opponent's deck really helps not necessarily change what your opponent does, but changes how you can interact with your opponent. And I think this card does a great job at being a sneaky spy. But that is not all. Last up, we have a user submission. They commented down below that they had a set of cards, and I don't think I'll be doing really sets for this little spotlight, but if you want to tweet at me, I'm going to be showcasing any custom cards that I think are good, or I'll make up my own if I feel like it, or I'll just go to the Custom Hearthstone Reddit and maybe not go to the top 5, but look at some other different cards to review. So if you want to tweet me, if you want to explain yourself in some words, that works fine. And I only want the comments to be filled of commentary about the cards and critique on how I'm presenting them. But just choosing one card from Nadev, who submitted this, we have QD Gun, a 7-mana 5/3 Battlecry. Choose an enemy minion and destroy a random different enemy minion. There are some typo errors, but it's alright. He did a lot of work to make a lot of cards based on the show Gravity Falls. Now, I really like this because it's similar to Mind Control Tech, except it's the other way around and it doesn't necessarily have a requirement. So it is a 7/5/3. So I think stat-wise, I think this is fine to be a 7/5/5 because on average your opponent isn't just going to have one big powerful minion. So I think just a little bit more value in this card is alright because most likely it's going to be a random effect. I would really love this to actually be choose a minion and destroy a different random minion, so not necessarily enemy. Maybe then it could be a 7-mana 5/5, but that's just my meme thoughts going through. But thank you for the submission. I hope you enjoyed the top Hearthstone cards of the week. Thank you for joining me, and until next time.